I knew the moment would haunt me forever, not just because of what she said, but because of how everyone laughed. It was supposed to be a day of peace, a sacred day. The sun was warm, the white chairs were arranged perfectly on the lawn, and my daughter, wrapped in lace and innocence, had just been christened. She was calm in my arms, her little fingers curled around my thumb as if she already knew she needed to hold on to me tightly. Then my mother-in-law leaned in toward her circle of friends and, loud enough for the whole gathering to hear, said, "She doesn't even look like our family. Must be someone else's." There was a ripple of laughter, casual and cruel. My heart dropped. I looked around the garden. People sipped lemonade, exchanged glances, and smiled behind their cups. I sat frozen on the bench, my daughter against my chest, unable to believe she said it out loud. Not a whisper, not a joke told in confidence, but at her own granddaughter's christening, in front of my husband's entire family, while I sat in white trying to hold myself together. I blinked back tears. My husband, David, wasn't even near me. He was speaking with the pastor across the yard, oblivious. My hands trembled as I pulled the baby's bonnet forward, as if covering her more could shield her from their stares. Shame bloomed in my chest, dark and suffocating. And then Lila stood. She had been standing beside me the whole time. My husband's daughter from his first marriage, 8 years old, clever, curious, far too observant for her age. She looked around at the crowd, her face blank and serious, and spoke in a voice that rang out louder than her sighs. "You're right," she said. "She does look like her real dad, the one Grandma cheated with." The crowd went dead silent, mouths parted, eyes widened. My mother-in-law went stiff like a statue, her wine glass frozen midair. The words hovered in the air, like smoke from a fire no one could put out. And then, slowly heads turned, not to me, not to the baby, but to the woman in the ivory blazer, with the smug smile that had just shattered. My hands gripped the baby a little tighter, but for the first time that day, it wasn't in fear. It was in awe, because somehow this little girl, who I wasn't even sure saw me as Mom, had done what no one else dared. She had spoken the truth, not to protect me, but because she knew what cruelty looked like and what justice should sound like. The moment passed in slow motion. My mother-in-law's face turned pale. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass, and then she placed it down on the table, so slowly it was like she thought if she moved carefully enough, no one would remember what had just happened. But they would. They already had. Because once a truth like that is spoken, you can't unhear it. Later, after the guests thinned out and the music died down, David found me sitting alone on the back steps, the baby asleep on my chest. Lila sat beside me, swinging her legs silently, not looking up. She didn't mean anything by it. David said gently, crouching down beside me. I stared ahead at the moonlit yard. "Didn't she? She's just old-fashioned. You know how she is. She humiliated me at our daughter's christening, in front of your entire family." David sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll talk to her." "That's not enough," I said, voice shaking. He looked at me, surprised by the steel in my tone. I'd always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, who smiled through gritted teeth. But something had changed. Maybe it was the way Lila stood up for me. Maybe it was the laughter from the guests. Maybe it was just the fact that I was tired of pretending, tired of swallowing pain just to keep the peace. She said I cheated. She questioned your daughter's paternity, and everyone laughed. David didn't have an answer for that. He just sat beside me, hands on his knees, staring into the dark. I didn't blame him. Not yet. But I was starting to see something that scared me. He wasn't going to protect me from his mother, because he never had. When David and I first met, I was working in publishing, living in a small apartment with a cat and too many books. He came into my life like a novel I didn't expect to love, a single dad, freshly divorced, sweet, and surprisingly romantic. Lila was 4 back then, and she clung to him like a lifeline. I admired that. I admired how devoted he was to her, how present he tried to be. Our relationship wasn't fast, but it was deep. He made me feel seen. He listened. He made room for me in a life that already had routines and rhythms shaped around another woman. And eventually, Lila began to look at me like I wasn't just Dad's girlfriend, but someone permanent. I fell in love with both of them. David proposed in the backyard of our first shared home. Nothing fancy, just fairy lights and laughter, and the sound of Lila saying, "Does this mean I get to call you Mommy now?" I cried that night, not just from happiness, but because I finally felt like I had a family of my own. Not the one I was born into, but the one I chose. When I got pregnant, it was unexpected, but welcome. I had wanted a child of my own, but I wasn't sure if it would ever happen. I had just started a new job. David was managing long hours, and life was hectic. But that second pink line on the test made everything still. We were thrilled. At least, I was. David was supportive, but something in him shifted. He became more anxious, more distant. He didn't want to tell his mother until I was almost 6 months in. And when we finally did, she stared at my stomach like it was an accusation. Well, she had said, "I guess Lila won't be the only one anymore." It wasn't excitement. It was a warning. That should have been the first sign. But I ignored it. I told myself she would come around, that once the baby was here, she would fall in love like we had. That blood was thicker than bitterness. I was wrong. From the moment my daughter was born, my mother-in-law kept her distance. She'd make little comments. "So pale," she'd say, or "Where'd she get that nose?" She never held her for long, and she never smiled at her the way she did with Lila. At first, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to cause tension. David was already stretched thin, and I didn't want to be seen as dramatic. But the comments kept coming. The looks, the doubts, the way she'd compare baby pictures. Lila had such strong features, even as a newborn. This one's softer. I started to wonder if she was trying to convince herself my daughter wasn't family, that somehow this baby threatened her idea of what their bloodline should be. Still, I stayed silent. Until the christening. That day, something cracked open in me. Not because of what she said, but because of who defended me. Lila, 8 years old, barefoot in the grass, brave beyond reason. She had been listening, watching, absorbing every moment. And when the time came, she chose truth over loyalty. She chose me. The next morning, I woke early. The house was quiet. I stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching my baby sleep. The soft whir of the fan, the glow of the morning sun. I felt the weight of everything all at once. My love for her, the pain of being questioned, the anger I had buried for too long. Lila knocked softly on the doorframe. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. I turned to her, kneeling down. Why would I be? Daddy said I should have kept quiet. I paused. My heart broke a little. "You told the truth," I said, "and sometimes truth is loud." She nodded slowly, then stepped closer and placed a drawing in my hand. It was crayon on paper, me, her, the baby, 3 stick figures with smiling faces, and a big sun over our heads. Above it, she wrote, "My real family." I didn't cry. I smiled, because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I folded the drawing with care, tucking it into my journal between pages I used to write my dreams, some already lived, some broken, and others only just beginning. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof that I wasn't invisible, that despite everything, Someone saw me, someone small but mighty who chose me without being asked to. That morning, I held my baby a little closer and made a decision that I should have made long ago. I was done playing the quiet one. That afternoon, David's mother came by unannounced. She walked in like she always did, without knocking, without permission, carrying a small white gift bag and an even smaller apology in her tone. "Thought I'd drop off something for the baby," she said with a tight smile, standing at the threshold of our kitchen. I stayed seated. My daughter was in my arms, mid-feeding, her soft coos the only sound filling the room. I didn't speak. She looked around, perhaps expecting David or Lila to appear to soften the moment. But it was just me, just the woman she humiliated. "I think there's been some confusion," she said finally, setting the bag on the counter. "You know how kids say things." I slowly lifted my gaze to her. "Do I?" She flinched just a little. "Lila's a good girl," she continued, smoothing the front of her blazer. "But she picks things up. Misunderstands." "No, she didn't." Silence again. I stood then, gently shifting my daughter against my shoulder, patting her back as she drifted into sleep. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked her in the eye. She heard what she heard. I said, calm and clear, "And you know what? I'm glad she did, because now everyone else heard it too." Her lips parted, the beginnings of some excuse forming, some backpedal, some gaslight wrapped in motherly concern. "You've always been very sensitive," she murmured, as if that was a flaw I'd grown like a weed. I smiled, and then I said the one thing I never had before. "Don't come to this house unless you're invited." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me? You heard me." For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but then she saw something in my expression. A boundary forged not in bitterness, but in absolute certainty. She turned stiffly, the gift bag still on the counter, and left without another word. I didn't tell David right away. Part of me was tired of asking him to see what I saw. For years, I'd excused his silence. I thought maybe he just wanted peace. But peace isn't silence. Silence, I was learning, was often complicity. Later that night, he noticed the unopened bag on the counter. "She came by?" he asked. "Yes." "She said anything?" "She won't be coming back." He frowned, and for a moment I thought he might argue. But then he looked at me, really looked, and something in his eyes shifted. "Okay," he said. And that was it. Just okay. But it wasn't okay. Not really, because it was never just her. It was every time he stayed quiet when she made those little comments. Every time he laughed them off. Every time I had to pretend it didn't bother me, so he wouldn't feel caught in the middle. I loved David, but I was no longer willing to be collateral damage in a war he refused to acknowledge. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. Lila became even more attached to me. She would sit with me during feedings, ask questions about when she was a baby, draw pictures of our new family. One evening, she asked if she could help bathe her baby sister. I watched her gently sponge the baby's arms, her tiny hands careful and sure. "She's lucky," Lila whispered as we dried the baby in a towel shaped like a bunny. "Why?" I asked. "Because she gets you from the beginning." I blinked fast, trying not to cry. David stood at the doorway watching us, a strange expression on his face. After the baby was settled and Lila went to bed, he came to me on the couch. "She really loves you," he said. "I love her, too." "I know." He hesitated. "I'm sorry I haven't always stood up the way I should have." I looked at him, not with anger, but with the kind of clarity that comes after months, years of pushing down disappointment. "I don't need you to protect me," I said, "but I need you to believe me, and I need you to act like you do." He nodded slowly, and for the first time, I saw A crack in his armor, not weakness but reckoning. The kind that changes a person if they let it. Time passed. We found a rhythm again. A better one. I stopped trying to force relationships that hurt. David started speaking up more, even when it was uncomfortable. The next family dinner, when his mother made a joke about Lila's drawings of that new baby taking over everything, he cut her off mid-sentence. "That's enough, Mom." It was the first time I ever heard him use that tone with her. She blinked, shocked. "I was kidding." "No, you weren't." And then he turned to me and said, "We're leaving." We left. Lila smiled the whole ride home. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from David's aunt, his mother's younger sister. Inside was a photo of David as a baby and one of his mother in her 20s. On the back of the second photo was a handwritten note. "She once told me the man in this photo wasn't your father's. Just thought you'd want to know." The man was clearly not David's father. I knew him from old family albums. This was someone else. Someone taller, broader, with a square jaw that I had seen before. On my baby. Suddenly, Lila's words at the christening were more than just a bold guess. They were a truth that had been buried so deep even David didn't know it. I showed him the letter that night. He sat down slowly, reading it twice. "She lied to me my whole life," he whispered. I sat beside him, unsure what to say. "She hated that baby because she looked like him," he continued, eyes wide with dawning horror. "She saw the man she cheated with in our daughter." I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry," he said, and this time I believed him. That was the moment everything truly shifted. David started therapy. He confronted his mother, not with rage, but with questions. She didn't deny it, just said she did what she had to do, and that some things are better left in the past. David disagreed. He didn't bring Lila to her house after that. He didn't invite her over. And when she sent birthday gifts, they remained unopened unless Lila asked for them, which she rarely did. We built something new. Not perfect, but ours. Lila flourished in school. She started calling the baby her real sister without any prompting. One evening, she told her therapist that she didn't feel like she had two moms anymore. "Just one," she said, "the one who stayed." And as for me, I started writing again. At first, just journal entries, then essays, then a blog. Women began messaging me, strangers, friends, acquaintances, telling me their own stories of subtle cruelty, of mother-in-laws who weaponized tradition, of families that smiled as they erased them. And they all said the same thing. I thought it was just me. It never is. When my daughter turned 1, we didn't throw a big party, just a picnic at the park, a few friends, and one big, silly cake. Lila helped her sister smash it. David took photos. I sat on a blanket barefoot in the grass and watched them laugh. It was quiet. It was real. And it was enough. That night, when the girls were asleep and the stars had come out, David wrapped his arms around me from behind and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For not walking away," he said, "even when you had every right to." I turned in his arms and looked him in the eyes. "I didn't stay for you," I said gently. "I stayed for her, for them, and for me. Because finally I knew my worth. And finally, so did he." That little girl had seen more truth than most adults ever do, and she still chose kindness, still chose to build. David's mother didn't reach out again, for a while. Not after David confronted her, not after the truth about her past surfaced. She went quiet, perhaps hoping silence would restore power. But silence, we had all learned, was no longer a shield, it was an admission. But then came the invitation. It arrived in a cream envelope addressed to David in her delicate cursive. Inside was a formal invite to her 75th birthday dinner, held at the same country club, where she hosted every family milestone. Signed only with her name. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just an expectation. David read it, sighed, and slid it across the table to me. She expects we'll go. I didn't answer. She probably wants to smooth things over publicly. He added, make it look like everything's fine. He wasn't wrong. But I also knew something he didn't. I was ready. I wasn't going to avoid that room or that woman. Not anymore. I had been humiliated in public. Now, if peace was to come, it wouldn't be behind closed doors with forced smiles. It would be spoken aloud, under light, with everyone watching. I'll go, I said. David looked up, startled. You sure? I nodded. And I'll bring both girls. He hesitated. Are you sure you want to bring Lila? I mean, after last time. She's not afraid of her, I said gently. Neither am I. He studied me for a long time, then finally said, okay. The night of the party, I dressed the baby in a pale blue dress with little white sandals. Lila wore lavender, her choice, and a tiny silver heart necklace that had once been mine. I wore black, not for drama, for clarity. I didn't want to blend in any more. The country club was filled with David's extended family, cousins, uncles, old friends. Laughter drifted from table to table, champagne flowed, and waiters moved like shadows in a choreographed dance. And then there she was, his mother, standing beneath a chandelier, pearls at her neck, hands clasped like royalty. She looked older somehow, tired, but her posture didn't waver. When she saw us, her smile tightened, but she didn't look surprised. She looked prepared. Anna, she greeted me, barely glancing at the girls. Elaine, I returned. David gave her a stiff hug. Lila offered a polite hello, and we took our seats. The dinner progressed as expected. Toasts, light music, distant chatter. She made no mention of what had happened, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. It was all polished grace, forced laughter, social etiquette. Until dessert. A waiter placed a large cake in front of her, white with gold script, Happy 75th, Elaine, piped elegantly across the top. Someone tapped a glass, and the room went quiet for speeches. She stood slowly, drawing every eye. I want to thank you all for being here, she began, voice smooth. It means the world to have my family by my side. She glanced at David, then at Lila. And of course, she said, turning to me, I'm so pleased to welcome, well, the newest addition to our family. Her eyes flicked briefly to the baby, then away again. There it was, that subtle, public reassertion of control, a performance of civility. She continued, we've had our ups and downs, but what matters is love, and forgiveness, and grace. A few guests clapped lightly. Then David stood. He hadn't planned to speak. I saw it in the way he glanced at me first, silently asking for permission. I gave him the slightest nod. I just want to say something, he said, since this is a night about truth and family. He paused, then looked straight at his mother. You said a lot about forgiveness, but forgiveness can't exist without honesty. And there's been very little honesty in this family for a long time. Whispers stirred. You humiliated my wife in front of everyone at our daughter's christening. You questioned her loyalty, her motherhood, and her place in this family. But worse than that, you lied. For decades. A hush swept the room. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the photo I had shown him months ago, the one of Elaine with the man who wasn't his father. She told me this man was just a friend. He continued, holding the photo high. But she told her sister something different. And the truth is, he was more than a friend. He was the man she had an affair with. And if you look closely, really look, you'll see his face in someone else now. In my daughter. Gasps. audible, raw, honest. Elaine's face drained of color. You wanted people to question my wife's fidelity, David said, but it was your own you couldn't face. You buried it for years, then projected your guilt onto an innocent child. And I won't let you get away with that anymore. He turned, walked back to our table, and sat beside me. Lila reached out and held his hand. The baby stirred in my arms, sensing the shift in the room. Elaine didn't speak. Couldn't. She stared at the photo, trembling, the weight of decades pressing down all at once. Someone cleared their throat. A cousin rose awkwardly to propose a toast to moving forward, but the energy had already shifted. Guests murmured. A few left. Others stayed but didn't approach her. The night ended not with fanfare, but with quiet confusion, the kind that lingers when a truth cuts too deep to ignore. We didn't stay for coffee. As we walked to the car, Lila slipped her hand into mine. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked down at her, this girl who once stood up for me when no one else did. "I am now." David held the car door open for me, and as we drove home, he said nothing. He didn't need to. He had spoken when it mattered most. When we got home, I tucked both girls into bed. Lila fell asleep quickly, her arms wrapped around her stuffed rabbit. I lingered a little longer beside the crib, watching the baby breathe in soft, rhythmic waves. David joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist. She didn't even try to deny it. He said quietly, "No," because she couldn't. I didn't know how heavy it would feel to finally say it all out loud. Truth usually is, but it's lighter than silence. He whispered. We stood there a while longer, just breathing, just being. The fallout came fast. Elaine's phone calls went unanswered. Her social circle grew colder. Her carefully cultivated image, one of prestige, order, tradition, cracked. Not because of what was said, but because it had been said at all. The truth, once named, changes the shape of everything around it. She sent David a letter weeks later. Not an apology, just a justification. I was young. It was a mistake. You never needed to know. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. We had already turned the page. I began to write more openly about the experience. Not her name. Not details that would expose our family, but about the feeling of being silenced, the wound of not being believed, the triumph of being defended in the light. Thousands read it, hundreds responded, and they all said the same thing: "Thank you." Sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's as soft as a child's drawing, as quiet as a husband finally saying, "Enough," as steady as a mother rocking her child in the dark. Our story was no longer one of humiliation. It was one of reclamation, and I was finally at peace with that. Spring settled into summer, and the light in our home began to change. Not just the golden warmth of longer days, but something subtler, more peaceful, more grounded. There were still shadows, of course. Wounds like ours don't vanish overnight. But something had shifted. We had chosen truth over comfort. And that choice, though painful, was setting us free. I returned to work part-time, editing manuscripts remotely while the baby napped and Lila was at school. David adjusted his schedule to be home earlier. We started cooking dinner together again, like we used to before things got so heavy. It wasn't magical or cinematic. It was quiet, slow, and healing. One evening, I caught Lila teaching her sister how to stack wooden blocks. The baby wasn't quite steady enough yet, so Lila gently guided her hands. "You don't have to be perfect," she whispered. "You just have to try." I had to step out of the room for a moment. It was strange, the silence that followed. Not the kind that feels cold or hollow, but the kind that signals something has ended. A chapter closed. There were no more barbed texts, no more tense invitations, no more need to pretend. And in that silence, we found space to build. David kept his distance from Elaine, not out of anger, but out of understanding that proximity didn't mean peace. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from the place where the wound keeps reopening. And that's exactly what we both did, quietly, resolutely together. There was no grand confrontation after that party, no sudden reconciliation, just distance, consequence. She tried, of course, in subtle ways. Birthday cards, flowers delivered, without a note, a donation in our baby's name to the church fund, small things that looked generous on the outside, but were empty on the inside, gestures without confession, gifts without apology. David didn't send them back, but he didn't respond either. That was his answer. One day, I asked Lila if she wanted to visit her grandmother. She thought for a long time, swinging her legs from the kitchen stool as she peeled a clementine. "I think I'm okay for now," she said. "She doesn't feel like family anymore." I didn't push. Children, if we let them, are some of the best truth-tellers we have. In the months that followed, we began to change how we defined family in our house. It wasn't just blood anymore. It was presence. It was love. It was who showed up, who told the truth, who chose us again and again. Lila had an aunt from her mother's side who visited more often now. She wasn't perfect, but she brought warmth. David's cousin Olivia became a frequent face, bringing over her kids for playdates and dinners. Our table felt fuller, but lighter. No performance. No pretense. And I started teaching again, just one writing class a week at the community center. Nothing big, nothing for money, but it reminded me who I was before everything got heavy. I saw women walk into that classroom holding their stories like bruises, unsure if anyone wanted to hear them. I told them, "Write it anyway," and they did. One night, after a class, I got home late to find the house quiet. The baby was asleep. Lila was curled on the couch next to David, both of them watching an old animated movie. I kissed them goodnight and lingered in the hallway for a moment, overwhelmed by a feeling I hadn't recognized in years. Wholeness, not perfection, but peace. That's when I knew the worst was truly over, not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer controlled the room. Elaine's name stopped coming up. Eventually, even the whispers among extended family faded. Some people quietly distanced themselves from her. Others pretended it never happened, but none of it mattered, because we weren't waiting on their approval anymore. Still, healing is never linear. Some nights, the memories came back. The humiliation at the christening, the way they all laughed, the way my husband stood across the yard, too far to stop it, the sting of holding my baby while people questioned if she even belonged to us. But then I remember what followed. Lila's voice, David's confrontation, my own refusal to disappear. Those memories were heavier, but they were mine, and they were stronger. I learned that motherhood isn't just about carrying a child. Sometimes it's about carrying the story and writing the ending yourself. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a year after the christening, I found Lila in the nursery, flipping through an old photo album. She was quiet, thoughtful, holding two pictures side by side, one of David's baby photo and one of the baby taken just a week ago. "They look alike," she said. I sat beside her. "They do. But she also looks like you," she added quickly, glancing up. "In the eyes. I think that's how she's so good at staring people down." I laughed. "She has your stubborn chin," I said back. Lila smiled. "She's like a mix. A new story." And she was right. We were all new stories now. A few weeks later, I got a message. From Elaine. Not a letter. Not a gift. A direct message on social media. Short. Uncertain. "I miss Lila. I'm sorry I hurt her. And you." I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't enough, but it was something. and it was the first time she had ever used the word sorry. I showed it to David. He read it, sighed, then said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to protect our peace." He nodded. So I replied, "Thank you for saying that. But healing takes time. And right now, we're focused on that." There was no response after that. And strangely, I was okay with it. The apology wasn't closure, but it was confirmation that the boundary we set had meaning, that our silence had power, that we didn't need to scream to be heard. Our baby turned 2 in autumn. We had a quiet party at home with close friends, a few neighbors, and lots of cake. Lila helped her blow out the candles, even though she didn't quite understand what they meant. After the guests left and the dishes were cleared, I found David in the backyard, holding a photo of the 2 girls. He looked up at me with eyes full of something soft and steady. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. Of course. I used to think family was about keeping things together, even if they were broken. I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe nothing would fall apart. He paused. "But I think I get it now. Sometimes things need to fall apart before they can be real again." I walked over and slipped my arm through his. "We're not broken," I said. "We just stopped pretending." He nodded. The wind rustled the trees. Somewhere inside, the girls were laughing. David turned to me again. "Thank you for staying, even when I didn't deserve it." I rested my head against his shoulder. "You learned," I whispered. "That's all I ever needed." Because the truth is, people make mistakes. Big ones, deep ones. But when they choose to face them, truly face them, it's no longer about what they did. It's about what they choose to do next. The seasons changed again. Leaves fell. The air cooled. Life, as it does, moved forward, not fast, not without friction, but forward all the same. I found myself slowing down in ways I never had before. Not because I was tired, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't running from anything. Not from judgment. Not from doubt. Not from her voice in the back of my mind. Silence no longer felt like a threat. It felt like rest. One evening, after dinner, I was folding laundry in the living room while Lila helped the baby stack cups on the carpet. David was fixing the loose kitchen cabinet, humming some old song under his breath. The house felt alive. Not perfect, just alive. I watched the girls for a moment. Lila's quiet focus, her patience, the way she gently corrected her sister without scolding her. It wasn't the kind of love you learn. It was the kind you choose. Later that night, as I sat beside Lila while she brushed her teeth, she looked at me in the mirror. "Do you think people always change?" she asked. I paused. "Not always, but I think they can." She rinsed her mouth, spit, and then said, "I think Daddy changed. You did too." "Did I?" She nodded. "Before, you used to smile even when you were sad. Now you only smile when you mean it." That one hit deeper than I expected. After she went to bed, I stayed in the hallway for a while, replaying her words. Kids don't always need big lessons. They need to see us live honestly, to watch us be strong and still vulnerable, to see us cry and then rise, to witness us stop pretending so they never learn to pretend themselves. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Real this time. Handwritten. Elaine's handwriting again, but this one was different. The envelope was unadorned. No fancy stickers, no floral design. Just my name. Just truth. Inside, her words were hesitant, imperfect, but they were human. "I see now what I did. Not just to you, but to my son. To Lila. I don't ask you to forget it. I wouldn't. But I'm sorry. For my silence. For my pride. For letting my shame become cruelty. I don't know how to make it right. But I'd like to learn, if you'll let me." I reread it 3 times. The penmanship trembled near the end. like she had to fight herself to get it all out. I sat with it. For days. I didn't tell David at first. I wanted to feel how I felt without anyone else's voice in my ear, because part of me still didn't trust it. I'd seen how apologies could be performative, strategic, hollow, but this one, something about it felt different. It was written like someone who had lost more than they expected to lose, and finally understood why. Eventually, I handed it to David. He read it in silence, then placed it on the table. "Your call?" he said. I nodded. The next morning, I texted her. "You can come for tea. Just you. Next Friday, 10 a.m. No expectations." I didn't tell Lila, didn't tell the babysitter, didn't tell myself what to expect. But that Friday, she showed up. No pearls, no forced perfume, just a plain blouse, jeans, and a nervous smile. I made chamomile. She held the mug with both hands and said, "Thank you." No performance, no defense. "I read what you wrote on your blog," she said after a long pause. "Oh." She nodded. At first I thought it was unfair, but the more I read, I saw myself in it. I didn't say anything, just sipped my tea. "I hated myself for what I did when I was young," she said slowly, "so I looked for someone else to blame. And when I saw her," she gestured toward the baby's photo on the shelf, "I saw everything I buried." It was the first time she spoke of my daughter as a person, not a scandal, not a resemblance, a person. "I blamed you because you loved freely, and I didn't know how." Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. "I don't expect you to trust me, but I wanted to sit here and look you in the eye, not for forgiveness, just to say it, so you'd never wonder if I knew what I did." And for the first time in 2 years, I believed her, not because the apology was perfect, but because it cost her something. She stayed for 37 minutes, then stood gently and asked if she could leave a small gift for the baby. I nodded. She placed a wrapped book on the table, hardcover, The Runaway Bunny, the kind of gift you'd give when you're trying to start again, not win. Then she thanked me and walked out. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. That night, I told David. He listened, then kissed the top of my head and said, "You're brave." I didn't feel brave. I just felt tired of being angry and ready to be whole. Lila found the book on the table the next morning. She flipped it open, smiled, and said, "This was my favorite when I was little. Do you want me to read it to both of you tonight?" I asked. She nodded. That evening, I did. The baby sat on my lap. Lila curled beside me, and I read aloud the words of a story that felt oddly fitting, about a bunny who tried to run away and a mother who followed him no matter where he went. And somewhere near the end, I realized some people leave, some people return, some stories break apart, but some find new ways to begin. That winter, we hosted Christmas for the first time. Just a small circle, David's cousin Olivia, my sister and her 2 boys, a neighbor from down the street. No grand gestures, just food, games, and warmth. And toward the end of the night, Lila asked if she could invite one more person. I looked at her. She didn't say the name. She didn't need to. I nodded. An hour later, Elaine walked in, holding a tin of shortbread cookies and looking like she was afraid to breathe. Lila ran to her first. The baby followed, and I let it happen, not because I forgot, but because I had already forgiven. It didn't make her family again. It just made her human. She didn't try to dominate the room, didn't make speeches or take credit for anything. She simply sat, poured cider, and asked if she could help clear the dishes. And when she left, she said, "Thank you for giving me a second chance I didn't deserve." I looked at her and said, "Don't waste it." She didn't. The new year came. The snow melted. Life continued. The baby turned 3. Lila turned 9. David started gardening. I published a small collection of essays. And on one quiet morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, watching the girls chase bubbles in the yard. No one was watching. No one was judging. There were no cameras, no speeches, just peace. Real peace. The kind that comes not from pretending nothing happened, but from surviving what did, and choosing to live anyway. I never got revenge. I got something better. A family I could be proud of. A story I could carry with both hands and say, yes, this happened, and we're still here. Sometimes the most powerful mic drop moment doesn't happen at a party. Sometimes it's in the quiet aftermath. In a baby's laugh, in a daughter's drawing, in a grandmother's late apology, in the sound of your own voice finally saying, I'm not afraid of you anymore. Because that's the real ending. Not the confrontation, not the exposure, but the moment you realize you don't need their approval. You never did.